Hello world, Jay Sherm here. Today I'm going to talk about something that I am currently doing, which is how to create a podcast. What are the top 3 things that you should do when thinking about starting a podcast? And the reason I'm doing this, which is to me a meta topic, because I'm doing a podcast episode about how to create a podcast, or why the things you should look for when you create a podcast, or why you should create one, is because a lot of people recently have been telling me they want to start a podcast. And some of them are experts in different fields, whether healthcare or history or business, fashion, anything. And they say they want to start a podcast because people tell them they should start one. Well, in my experience, there are 3 things that you need to do in order to even come close to thinking about starting one. Because a lot of the podcasts that I've listened to from people who said, I started a podcast over the pandemic, I listened to an episode or 2 and it was really not that great. And here are the reasons why. I'm going to give you the top 3 things that you should do. The first thing you need to do before you even think about starting a podcast is coming up with your niche topic in the industry that you're in. So, for example, if you are going to be doing the healthcare industry, and you think that you're just going to talk about healthcare in general, that may not be very, palatable for people because it's very generic, it's very broad, and there may be already a lot of podcasts in the healthcare industry, like doctors that are, experts. Dr. Oz, I'm sure, has a podcast, for example. And so you should pick a topic within healthcare that you are an expert. So let's say that you are really good at, meditation. Right? You're good at helping people breathe with deep breathing exercises. I know there are like people who are, experts at helping people alleviate stress, whether it's with medicine, homeopathic medicine, or whatever. So let's just say that's your thing. So now, before you start your meditation podcast, you need to do a search. So you need to go onto the iTunes podcast searching and all the other podcast platforms and search for meditation. Are there like 100 of them? Are there only 3? Are there 50? How many are there? Start listening to the episodes. See what they're putting out first. Now, if it's a lot of the same types of breathing exercises and helping you calm your mind, etc., well, maybe you can come up with a different angle, a different approach. Maybe yours would be meditation through music. So you teach people how to hum a tune while they breathe. I don't know. I'm just saying you need to differentiate yourself. If you're doing a business podcast and you're really good at, say, finances and how to do accounting work, well, how many people are doing that kind of podcast once again? So maybe yours is going to be more focused on budgeting, how to create better budgets and how to create, or maybe retirement planning. Maybe you can do one where you help people specifically plan for the future. Okay. So again, any kind of industry that you're in, whatever you're an expert in, you need to find a topic that you're really good at, that you know a lot of things about, that you can list out 50 topics for 50 episodes about that topic, and then find the niche within those topics within that industry. And that way you're not just another podcast in the sea of podcasts. And like I mentioned, one of the best ways to figure that out is to do your research. Go online, look at the top 10 podcasts in your industry, in your field, see what they're doing, and see how you can do it differently. The second thing you should do before starting a podcast, and this is a really important one, I did this years ago when I first started my podcast, is really sit down and brainstorm a list of titles for your episodes. So this means, let's say you're a fashion expert and you're good at making clothes and you're good at making accessories and whatnot. Well, how many topics can you come up with for fashion? Is it how to choose the right fabrics? How to pick the right dress for a cocktail event? How to choose the right suit for a wedding? And so on and so forth. How many topics can you come up with for your podcast? If you start to type out titles and you start to see that you're around 5 or 10 topics or titles for your episodes, and then you start to fall short on more ideas, it may not be a good podcast niche or a good podcast, not a good topic, not a good industry. You might have to think about something more than that. You may have to think broader. Because a lot of times people think they're experts in something, and they are, but they fall short with the amount of knowledge they have. And that's really the second piece of the podcast, is knowledge. Because when people listen to podcasts, typically, not always, because there's a lot of, true crime and like fiction, science fiction and comedy and things like that. But typically when you're listening to a podcast, a lot of people want to learn something. They want to learn from what you know, topics about, the industry. They're interested because they found you and they searched for business or fashion or healthcare, whatever it was, history. So they want to learn from you. So the more topics, the more knowledge that you can give somebody, the more they're going to return to the next episode to learn more and more and more. So you really have to come up with, I'd say, at least 100 episodes. This is probably in my 60 something episode. I'm almost at 100. So every week I put out an episode, and every week I give you a new topic or a new, stream of knowledge, a new fact that I kind of, embellish a bit and give you more information about. And of course, part of this is bringing in experts. So you want to also interview people in your field. So, let's say you're in the food industry and you're a cook or you're a chef, and every episode you do is a new recipe and how to do the recipe. Maybe the next week you bring in an expert chef from a restaurant and you ask them questions about how they prepare food and what brought them to the art of cuisine. And, so you want to kind of break things up a bit. Bringing in a guest every so often. I don't think having a guest every single episode is really needed. I know a lot of podcasts out there that are popular. That's what they do. I don't do that. I do every other episode as a guest, and then every other episode is one of my own topics. And then I also do topics about the future. So I kind of break things up a bit so it's not always the same exact thing. So think about doing that as well, to kind of break up your podcast into separate categories, whether it's experts that you interview, the topics that you're knowledgeable in, and then something kind of out there, right? Something in the space of what you do. Because, like, for example, mine is technology and business and startups, and the future in technology kind of, it works its way back into that, because, we live in a future of technology, right? With smartphones and internet, satellites, spaceships, we live in all this stuff. So to me, it's kind of correlated with my topic. So you can do something similar. And the third thing you need to do before starting a podcast is learn how to use the equipment. How many times have I turned on a podcast that somebody said they started, and the audio was literally from their iPhone? It was horrible audio. It was from their phone, or, it sounded like it was muffled, or there was static, or it sounded not very clear. And, it just wasn't good. It wasn't a good quality podcast. And the thing about podcasts is it's all about audio, right? And you need to have a good microphone. I use the Rodecaster, right? And you need a good audio capture device. I use the Zoom H4n. I use OBS Studio for capturing the video that I use for my YouTube videos. And I use Audacity to do the audio editing, because you need to remove the noise from the background. You need to use equalization to add treble or bass, or both. You need to do a limiter, so you're limiting the volume so it's not hitting peaks, and so that it's level the whole entire time. And, really learn how to use it, because if you don't do that, then people are going to turn on your podcast and it's going to sound like crap, and they're going to turn it off. Okay, so you're not going to get a lot of followers. But if it sounds professional and, you sound good, then people will be, okay, this sounds good. It sounds professional. They put some time, effort, and money into this podcast. I will listen to it. And also keep in mind, buying equipment, it can cost money. A microphone might be $100 or $200. The audio device, $100. You're going to need a computer or a laptop that can record everything. At least the Audacity software is free, but you are going to spend a couple $100s to get your equipment up and running. If you want to go a cheaper route and start small, get a cheaper microphone, cheaper audio device, or just record directly from your microphone directly into Audacity, you can do that. I just prefer to do it the way that I do it, because it comes out very professional, as you can hear right now. But if you want to start out small, do a cheaper route, right? And just to get used to doing the podcast episodes, and see if you even enjoy doing it. Because the truth is, podcasting is hard work. It takes a toll on your voice. You have to have an episode out every single week, if not more. Some podcasts have 2 episodes a week. and you have to, be able to talk about the topic every single time you're doing a podcast. And then you have to do all the editing. And people forget something. When you do podcasting, you don't just talk into a microphone, record it, and then put it out there. You have to do all the editing that I just talked about. If you're doing a video, you have to do the video editing. Then you have to do the audio editing. Then you have to add the intro and the outro. You have to add the credits. You have to make a thumbnail for YouTube. You have to make a thumbnail for your podcast episode, meaning you have to make graphics. There are free websites where you can make them. I do them in Photoshop myself from scratch, but those take time, whether you're doing it either way. Then you have to promote it on social media. That takes time. You have to create the shortened links on Bitly or whatever you're using. You have to post the thumbnails and you have to come up with the copy, the summary of the episode. You have to type that up. I mean, these things take time. And for me personally, doing a podcast and a YouTube channel, it's almost like a part-time job. I mean, I definitely spend a couple of hours a week doing this, sometimes more, and it's definitely work, especially when you have a week full of interviews with people, whether you're being interviewed or you're interviewing people, and then you have to do your regular episodes. You have to do all the editing, and if you're not hiring someone to produce all your content, it's a lot of work. So you have to be ready to commit to being a podcaster. Don't start a podcast, put it out there, and then not release episodes, because then you're not going to get any listeners. You have to be consistent week by week. And if I can give you one suggestion, it's a good tip, is when you create episodes for your podcast, try to plan out a couple of episodes that you're going to record within, in one day, in like a couple of hour time frame. Just block out that time frame to record multiple episodes, change your outfit, etc. Take a break in between, drink some water or some tea, but record multiple episodes. And that way you're recording multiple weeks worth of content in just a couple of hours, which will save you a lot of time. And it kind of, when you're recording a podcast, you're kind of in a mindset and in a zone. So I believe that's a good way to do it. It's what I do. And I want to leave you with one bonus tip. It's not the 3 tips, but it should be included because a lot of people talk about your audience, right? Who are you targeting with your podcast? The reason I didn't make it one of my tips is because what I found with my podcast and with other people's podcasts is they're not 100% sure who their audience is in the first place. So you don't actually find out until you start releasing episodes. But if you do some groundwork in your industry, your topics, your expertise, and you kind of go on Facebook groups and social media groups and you start to learn what types of people are interested in the topics that you're going to provide on the podcast, or what type of stories, maybe you can then cater the episodes to that audience so that you reach them more effectively. And this, of course, will help you gain a sponsor or have brands come to you, companies come to you with their advertisements to reach that audience, because you can tell them, hey, I have people from 20 years old to 30 years old, these genders, these demographics, whatnot, on my podcast. So maybe you'll want to advertise to them because your product fits what, that kind of person buys. Knowing your audience is also important. I just feel as though it's something that you kind of learn as you go along and you release episodes. And maybe if you have analytics on the platform you're using, it'll tell you what kind of people you're getting, and then you can target those people more effectively. Hopefully these tips will help you create your podcast. If you have any questions on the equipment or the process or what topics you want to cover, what industry you're in, and you're not sure exactly what to do and you need to know, maybe I can help you. So post some comments in terms of what you think your podcast is going to be about, what you're an expert in, what kind of topics you should talk about, and I'll tell you what I think. And as always, I hope you learned something, and I will see you all in next week's episode.